Hey, good evening, Galleon. This is Mayor Tom O'Leary. Another Monday night here at City Hall. Uh, Been looking forward as I do over the weekend, every weekend, to do these live streams. So, at the risk of only having one topic to talk about and talking about it every week, I want to give you a couple of updates on the bike trail, bike path. Um, and it goes like this. I want to thank the young people who are signed to Galleon, actually Crawford County, through the federal work program, working for Goodwill, I believe, out of Marion. They've been over the last couple of weeks on the days that they're in Galleon. They alternate with Galleon, between Galleon and Bucyrus, but assisting in cleaning up some of the glass and other auto parts out on the very first part of the trail. So I want to recognize them. I know Matt went out to talk to them with the hope that one of them or several of them would want to go on camera. So they didn't, but I guess they agreed to have some pictures taken, and I want to thank them for what they're doing. Connected with that is we're going to continue to solicit groups of high school students if possible, and certainly any service clubs in the community that are interested in perhaps doing a forever adopt a highway, but at least adopt a bike trail and assist us in cleaning up some of the glass that could present a potential injury to people who got off the trail. We were talking, over the last few days about that. A lot of people out there walking the trail. So as my wife and I walk the trail, you see a lot of glass. I think the point that my wife made is a real good point, is that it's animals on the trail walking off the trail that we want to avoid getting their paw cut, that kind of thing. And more obviously, you don't want young people or people of all ages that would stray off the trail to get themselves hurt. So we're going to spend an extra week or two at least getting that policed a little bit better, and actually made a decision today, working with the local contractor that's going to do the seeding, to wait into the fall of the year. This middle of the summer thing, and as dry as it's been, it doesn't seem like a good idea to do all the seeding. So what you'll see the next few days is hopefully the striping of the center lane, and then a more or less unofficial official opening. So what I've seen over the last few weeks is that the curious folks in our community have ventured out there, and it's really great to see the trail being used, what I consider extensively, right from the start. So one of the neat things about this so-called, if you will, soft opening is that you begin to see some of the issues we're going to need to address. And I don't want to spend a lot of time lecturing or folks or wagging fingers, but heck, it's 1.6 miles. So there's no reason to throw your Mountain Dew bottle that you finished up off to the side of it so that some dumb 64-year-old Irishman has to come by and pick it up. So we're going to have to do some things with placement, I believe, of a trash receptacle or two. But I think the best way to keep this new asset, this new facility here in town, in tip-top shape is, kind of like they say when you go to a concert or a ballpark, leave the place like you found it, which is picked up. So we'll want to deal with that. I think the more I'm out there, the more I realize there are a couple locations that would be very nice for benches and perhaps some picnic tables in not this year certainly, but next year as we have a chance to maintain the area that's right outside the right of way, but within city property. So pretty neat activity. I'm real excited about finishing it, but in terms of getting out there and using it, I think do it carefully, and we're going to put some tape up to to at least warn folks to stay off the right-of-way in the area that may have a little bit of a safety hazard. So I think that's about all I've got on the bike path, unless there's some questions. We're waiting to receive what would be this year's allocation of freeze funds. People may recall that earlier in the year, when a lot of city government functions and activities kind of went on hold, decision was made basically because of uncertainty of our financial situation to back off any freeze projects this year. And then I believe it was it'll be a month ago on Tuesday night, tomorrow, when we have a council meeting, the decision was made to go ahead and put through a list of previously reviewed and approved projects and ask for some funding. So we expect to see those dollars coming through, and I think some of the projects will get tackled yet this year. The biggest project that of those that have been designated in I think we're probably cutting it close, are improvements to the swimming pool. Our thoughts are we'll get the money here in several weeks, and then when the pool closes late summer, early fall, then we'll make those improvements. Includes painting and some repairs, and certainly not an entire replacement, but certainly a rebuild of the existing slide, which we've gotten in this community a lot of use out of that, but it needs some shoring up and painting for certain. So that and just in a small handful of other projects is really what we hope to get done with the freeze projects this year. From beyond that, I'll stop for a second if there are any questions.
Yes, I do have
All right,
one so far tonight. This came from Travis. He asked, could there possibly be some shade structures added to the park? I assume over in the area where the new playground is.
Yeah, it's a neat idea. I think that it's been particularly hot, and that kind of puts the emphasis on the need for shade. If Travis or anybody else will recall, the first year we had the splash park open, it's a lot of concrete over there, as there is at the playground, and right away you realized how much heat that concrete reflects, and so we have since then put up two nice shade structures, and that's kind of the plan for next year. I don't see it as a freeze project, but I see it's something that would be paid out of regular city funds, parks funds. So yeah, it's a great idea, and some time will have to be spent locating them, but what I really expect to see is in and around the benches at the new playground is where we'd locate them. I didn't consult with NASA on that. That was just something I thought made sense. And we're looking very closely. One of the regrets we have on the set of freeze projects I made mention of a minute ago is that we didn't include the rebuild of the shelter house down there, which gets a lot of use, and now with the modern bathroom and the new playground, it wasn't looking great before, but it's starting to look like it's time for a 21st century update. So those things are on their way, but Travis's underlying question, a good one, and I think the answer is yes. It's something that we actually, on those shades, we had the metal fabricated. If you've been out in the splash park, you know what I'm talking about. The metal was fabricated by folks in the fire department and painted by our service department staff, and then we used a local canvas company, and they did a super good job putting that up for us, and I don't think we're in year 3 or 4 on that. And as somebody who goes out there and watches my kids out there, my grandkids out there, it's the wear and tear on it's minimal. So something like that is what we'll likely put at the now not so new playground. But anyway, anything else?
Yeah, I had another one come in from
Yeah.
Jeremiah. He says, I have noticed over the past few weeks the dumpsters at the pool have been overflowing. Can something be done with Rumpke to address this?
Well, I think yeah, sure. I think the answer is put it, their answer would be, and mine would be too, if positions reverse, is put another dumpster out there. What has happened, certainly, is 2 weeks ago, on the 4th, there was the overflow, and I didn't notice this weekend when I was out through the park, but if it overflowed again, then, we'll take a look at that and perhaps put another a container box out there. I don't want it to become a substitute for having a garbage man and having your garbage picked up like ordinary folks do. I know things are tough, but things are tough for the people who are picking up your garbage too, so I don't want to go through the process of going through the garbage that's out there to see whose letters are in there, but I know from years ago when I was in charge of the county landfill, that's what we did. People would show up, the landfill was closed, they irritated, they'd leave halfway home, back to wherever home was, they'd just throw it out in the road ditch. And this is kind of the equivalent of that, taking your own garbage and dumping it by there. So think point well taken with the need not to have it laying around, but that had become a real problem with the recycling trailer at East Park, and we need to keep an eye on that the Heisey Park especially. The other one I see being used is a publicly paid for private garbage services sometimes out at the reservoir, out at Amix. People go out there and irresponsibly dump their garbage. So I don't want to, I don't want to be the garbage police today, but it doesn't take much to hang a picture out there or a camera out there that's real good at seeing whose license plate it is, and I'd hate to get into that kind of enforcement to stop that, but it's a point well made, and we'll talk to Rumpke about what the solution is. And I wish I could remember off the top of my head what that monthly service costs us for each one of those dumpsters, but it's not an insignificant amount of money that is out there for the dumpsters. And so we'll stop it there. That's for public use and not for private use. It's probably too much said. Anything else in the question box?
Not as of right now.
Okay. I want to go back to something that we spent a little bit of time on 2 weeks ago, see if some more questions come in. And that has to do with, and it's not on tomorrow night's council meeting, but it is going to come up over the horizon, if you will, pretty soon. And that's the idea of the city putting up for sale our transmission part of our electric distribution system. So there was I thought a really constructive committee meeting a couple weeks ago. It's the first weekend or first Wednesday of the month, and a lot of participation over the internet, and it's a complicated subject, and so without trying to dissect the whole subject, I think it's important to distinguish a couple of things. One is that the proposal is to sell to the best bidder the transmission system, which is the connection between First Energy and our various substations. And I won't get into the inane detail of where they're at and what they're named, but there's an initial substation south of town that the power comes in, and then it is distributed or actually transmitted. It's a transmission line, and it connects the substations so that we can have a looped grid. No one is proposing putting up for sale the distribution system, the metering, the electric service, the benefit of having someone local when we have an outage coming out to fix it. I know when I first was elected mayor, there was a lot of discussion about all the outages. Knock on wood, that seems to be have subsided as we completed a major infrastructure project 3 years ago. So the proposal is to sell the transmission lines and the part of the system that transmits that higher voltage into our substations, which then reduces the voltage for consumption for industry, commercial, and for most of us residential customers. Okay, so that's the proposal. Well, why would we want to do that? The shortest version of that story is that in the bill that the city of Galion gets from AMP, there is a portion of that bill that goes to fund transmission facilities, like I was just talking about, throughout a multi-county, in fact, a multi-state area. The way it works now is that's figured into your bill. We pay that, the city pays that, and it's part of the existing rate structure. What we would hope to do with this is that we could move the costing, the investment in upgrading that part of what's now our system, which we would like to see someone come in and acquire from us. We could then fund the improvements to that system, and there, anyone who's worked at the line department today or in the past will tell you that that system was there when they started. The poles and most of the wire was there when they started, and so it's been serving us for a long time. Without this notion of finding a transmission operator or owner, it's up to us, the small customer base, to fund that renovation, fund that rebuilding. Our belief is, our hope is that if we find a bidder for that we'll be able to take that portion of the bill, which is several $100,000 a month, and have those dollars actually come back to our community to improve that transmission part of our network, and allow those costs to be spread out throughout a multi-county, multi-state area, rather than having them funded by local customers. So the first time that I heard about this idea, I thought interesting, but let's check it out. So after a lot of homework, we're really at the point where we're discussing what things we want in a bidding document that we would solicit for bids. One of the key things that we would maintain or be able to sustain is that when we have an outage that is in the transmission system, which oftentimes is the power coming into one of our substations. An animal, I know it sounds silly, but often squirrels will kind of end their existence, and they'll be electrocuted on those lines. That'll oftentimes cause our system to either dip or have an outage. In this post-sale world, we're going to require any bidders that would bid on that part of our system to guarantee that we'll have service, that any outage will be dealt with within a certain period of time. Our expectation is that the successful bidders will probably rely on our staff to do the repairs, and we, the City of Galion, would bill that provider, that acquiring entity, for our time, labor, and materials. So if you run into a situation where we have a number of outages, those costs would be shifted. Outages in the transmission system, those costs would be shifted to the potential acquirer or buyer of that transmission system. So it's kind of complicated, and I hope, and I know that council is looking at the, I want to say complexity like it's some sort of fancy word, but the complexity of the proposal, and we're really hoping that the law director gets a bidding document put together here in the relatively near future, and we can have the discussion, have the vote in council, and see if there's some people interested in buying the system. So it's a couple other features about it, but those are the main fundamentals of what we're proposing to do, what council is considering. And the night that it was discussed a couple of weeks ago, there was a lot of information and a lot of comments as that was live streamed that night. And sometimes you can't tell whether the comments are serious or whether they're sarcastic, or some of the commenters are, think they're trying to be funny when they really should take some time and understand what the city's proposing. It's I'm not big on using win-win language, but this is it has a very much a case where this could be a winner for customers, winners for the city, and probably winners for the entity that would acquire the system. So, all right, I'll stop there.
Debbie did have a question
Right.
related to this. Will this increase the electric bill?
No, it actually has it is, as I said one other time we were talking about this, has the potential to be a hedge against rate increases. Why I say that is in 21 there are two major debts that some were incurred before we went back to the merit system, and another portion of that was incurred when we made a decision to complete the upgrade of our distribution network. In any case, those debts will be paid off a large debt issuance in 21 and an even larger one in 23. And what we talked about within council committee and here in the mayor's office is about the time that we pay that off, we're going to need probably to upgrade this same transmission system that I've been spending a couple of minutes talking about. So if we're successful in finding a buyer and also successful in getting the regional dollars directed back here to Galleon, then the answer to Debbie's question, was it Debbie? Debbie's question is that should act as a hedge against, or even possibly a minor rate reduction. So no, it won't increase the rates. We're going to somebody will be acquiring it from us and then using the money that we've already paying into this regional entity, getting our share of it back. So again, people who are like scratching their head even after a couple of explanations, just be patient with yourself and think through it, call, do a little reading on the internet, and I expect to continue to talk about it until the legislation appears on the council agenda, and I would be surprised if council would make a major decision like this without holding it to a couple of readings rather than just voting it through the first night it appears on the agenda. So anyway, it's a big deal. I think it's a real positive thing, and when you're avoiding wanting to talk about Charles Street and the ongoing frustration in getting that project done, I'll talk about bike path and I'll talk about anything other than Charles Street.
That was going to be a question for tonight.
Yeah, I imagine it is. And so I don't know if there is a specific. I'll go ahead and answer the question they have.
Yes,
Yeah.
Matt asked that.
Yeah, and that was what? When's it going to be done? And
Yep.
There's a completion date extended to the end of the month, and I think the contractor fully intends to be finished by then. Let's hope they're right. There's a lot of work to be done out there, and then there's certainly quite a bit of pavement restoration that we need to get right. Now, once they get all of the construction cleaned up, as I ask about that, I'm told that the Charles Street itself hasn't been chewed up too much or damaged too much the construction process, but we'll kind of wait and see, once they're done. So, end of July, pigs can fly. We'll have a big celebration.
Okay. And last question I had for tonight
Yeah.
came from Samantha. Can Galleon install windmills or a solar grid?
Oh Gosh, that's a neat question. It's a complicated question. First, I'll give you my opinion about it. I'm not real big on windmills. And in this part of the country, this part of the state, just about everywhere they put up a substantial number of windmills, there's a lot of public opposition. I think isolated windmills. I've heard the idea of putting a windmill or two perhaps out at Pico Park and taking that off the, that off the grid, if you will, off the customers, if you will, or the meters that get electric through our regular amp purchases. If the wind's blowing when you need the lights on, that's a heck of a good idea, but I'm not that excited about wind. Solar's real intriguing because when you look at when we peak out in electric, like the last couple of weeks or so, we've had the 90 degrees, not a cloud in the sky, our electric usage is up significantly. And without getting into the nitty-gritty, during those peak times, the power that we're buying to satisfy everybody's desire for air conditioning. Largely, it's the industrial load, but what causes the peak in Galion is the residential load that hits that pretty hard. And I'm certainly not suggesting people turn off their air conditioners, don't get me wrong, but that power is pretty expensive power. Solar is intriguing, as I said a minute ago, because it corresponds with that. When we need the peaking energy is when the sun's out, and it corresponds pretty well. Real briefly, I'll talk about another layer of this. As we were investigating this, and this might be new to a lot of people, this information might be new to a lot of people. Galion is the host, the location of a couple of diesel-fired power stations that are peaking stations. There's one out by the industrial park out on 598, kind of between E Crane and Elliott's, if you will, on the north side of the street, sits back in a wooded area. That is dispatched remotely, and it's turned on and fired up during those peak times. It is during those peak times that the same system I was talking about before, the Regional Transmission Authority, that's when they measure what our individual peak is, or what the peak in this part of north central Ohio that we're part of is. Well, when that happens, the grid, if you will, sees us as being a power supplier. Now, mind you that the other 360 days out of the year, we are buying power, but during those peak days, we are frequently energized. Our little diesel system is energized, and it puts more power into the grid than we're drawing down. And as a result of that, any of the solar financing that you see around muni financing, they're not particularly interested in us because of the fact that we're seen as a surplus power. So last thing I'd say about solar power, Samantha, is that I think it makes most sense where we have a large rooftop and there's a reasonably sized electric customer that would be using the electricity that they generate. That makes an awful lot of sense. And some of the major projects that are being discussed, including the Freeze Center, there is at least a review of whether or not including solar panels on the roof of such a large roof structure would help that facility stay off the power grid, and generate a fair amount of their power in what's called behind the meter, and instead of in front of the meter. So if that isn't too horribly confusing, I think the summary of the answer is wind power, not wild about. It hits a lot of opposition. Solar power, very intriguing for the reasons I mentioned, and I think its most hopeful application would be a major new building. either, let's say, the Free Center, or just hypothetically, when the new spec building is built out at the Pico facility, it may make sense for that facility to bear the incremental cost and put some solar panels up and get with the future, or at least see if it makes sense as part of that overall investment. So, I'm doing pretty well not over answering the question. I hope I didn't over answer that solar power one. The AMP-T discussion of the transmission, that's a little complicated by its very nature, and so it's the kind of thing that if people are interested in getting a better grasp on, just kind of stay tuned to what happens at City Council, and then ask some questions of your council members to see where they stand on it and what way they can point you in the direction of learning more about it. So, is that what we got tonight?
That is what we got tonight.
All right, it's great to be in Galleon as always, and keep up the safe behavior, and wish everybody to maintain good health and all of that stuff that is super important. But maybe in this time you hear everybody saying stay well, so I'll join that and say stay healthy, stay well. If you have time, tune into the City Council meeting tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. With that, good night. See you next week.